Welcome back to the panel discussion, Government and Robotics, the shift from low value to high value work, sponsored by UiPath on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network. I'm Jason Miller. My guests today are Justin Herman, the Emerging Citizen Technology Office Lead in the General Services Administration, Adam Goldberg, the Executive Architect in the Office of Financial Innovation and Transformation at the Treasury Department, Harrison Smith, the Acting Chief Procurement Officer for the IRS, Jim Walker, the Director of Public Sector Marketing for UiPath. We learned in the first segment a lot about where things are and where maybe each of you guys are going with robotics and the role it plays. Let me turn to Jim and let me broaden this a little bit. And one of the things that came up that I brought up and we talked a little bit about is why RPA? Why is it working? Why are people so excited about it? And I think one of the reasons that I brought up was the personnel issue, the hiring freezes and the inability to hire. And Harrison brought up the fact that IRS lost 40,000 employees over the last decade or so. But talk a little bit from your perspective. When you talk to agencies, when the door opens and you walk in and you guys present why UiPath or why RPA, what's different for you? What are you seeing?
Well, so we have a cloud, first mentality in the government. We have an automation first mentality. And in order to do that, take the diversity of this table and any other panel that you put together with RPA. It's not CIO A, CIO B, and CIO C. It's CFO, it's CXO, it's CTO. It's a business unit down. It's a shared service. This is the first time when we've had a software that wasn't built for a thing. This is not SAP built for financials. This is not a calendar program for executive assistants to use for It's an application now that can be used by almost anyone in the workplace, and it can be used for anything you want to use it for. That's completely and totally different from any other software we procured in the past. We always bought database software to do database, and it promised never to be your word processor. And now we have a piece of software that says, I'll do whatever you want, when you'd like for it to be done, and I promise to rigorously only do what you tell me to do. This is not artificial intelligence and deep learning and all that. It's repetitive, routine tasks that you say, please do this at this time.
Justin, Jim.
Yeah, I don't want to add anything too controversial into this, but agencies will come and they'll say things like, oh, I've been reading about AI. I've been reading about all these great emerging technologies.
Probably on Federal News Network.
Yeah, and I need it in my organization. And a lot of times, and comparing, is that when we're talking about the practical application today for IT modernization, how you're going to do more with less, the challenges that we have, a lot of times people will come to the table talking and asking about things around things like AI. But what they really need and what they start deploying is RPA. And so not only is it something that is affecting and delivering and has the potential to today on process improvement, but it's also a stepping stone and foundation of other things and next things like intelligent automation and things. And so again, when we're looking, and you mentioned earlier about how there's just such a rush right now, it's because agencies over the last few years have done a wonderful job really opening up the scope and the mind and the toolbox on realizing all the different things that are at the table technology-wise to help them solve their problems. But when it comes right now, things that are applicable and accessible for them to deploy in order to meet their FY19 goals, if an agency isn't looking at RPA, I would encourage them to.
Harrison, the procurement world is not known to take risks. I'm just going to put that out there.
What are you saying, Jason?
I'm saying that maybe sometimes people in the procurement world are a little risk averse. And did you find that as you started to say, hey, we're going to try this out, we're going to go down this path, did you have some contracting officers or contract specialists go, well, what do you mean it's going to pull data from sam.gov and put it right into my contract? I have to do that. Right. What was the reaction? Because I think just to play off of Jim and what Justin were saying about this is a software for everyone and not just for the tech world.
Yeah, no, I think that there's certainly some part of that because we're human beings and we don't really appreciate change very often. And I think it's interesting to make the distinction between change and loss. Right? I don't want to have a loss of what I do on a day-to-day basis. Right? I don't want to have a loss of who I am within the workforce. But I think that changes fundamentally when you talk about almost the ubiquitous nature of an expert in this arena. Right, we're looking for folks who are experts at processing procurement transactions. We're looking for folks that are experts at processing financial transactions. And so when it turns into this, what can we do to help you do your job better? Well, I wish I didn't have to do this and type in a number in 8 separate websites. Okay, there's a technology that we can help you do that. And when you have that conversation about the folks, the CXO, the CIO, the CPO, they are not the experts. The experts are the individuals who are supporting the customer on a day-to-day basis. That's where you really get it. And then folks start to get excited about it. They're like, wait, can we use it for this? And you have this conversation, yes, what is our return on investment going to be? How are we going to save things? And it really helps get that engine of innovation and excitement going within an organization where you say, hey, if you've got a great idea, bring it forward and make a recommendation on how to use the technology, because then we can do things like this, then we can do things like that. I think that's one of the fundamental shifts. And really the risk portion, we talked about this a little bit briefly, but the cost and the deployment time is relatively low, right? We're not talking about 12 to 18 to 24 months to develop, pick a major IT system. This is something where it's small enough where we can say, hey, I spent X number of dollars on this. I spent 3 to 4 to 5 months. It didn't work. Let me turn it off, let me shut it down. And as long as we get there from a procurement standpoint, which is obviously where we come in, where we can turn it off quickly if it's not working and move on to the next item, that's okay. It's these long 5-year engagements where we tend to get ourselves into difficulty. So I think that combination of having the experts at the base level and also the time with which you can demonstrate success, hopefully, or frankly say, hey, that's not working right now, let's turn it off and pivot a different direction. That's really one of the fundamental differences.
Jim, I'm going to put you on the spot. I'm going to throw you a curveball, so I'm warning you now.
All right.
Generally speaking, and I know you can't blanket every single agency and every single customer, but what's the time it takes to go from, I want this, to it's at least being tested? Is it a week? Is it a month? Is it 6 months? Can you give me a trend?
Yeah, so I think Drew Morgan over at NASA FEM last week was talking about it takes about a year. So I would say it depending upon your appetite for risk, it's 6 months to a year. 6 months says you do the NASA thing where you give it a PIV card and you get it out there and you watch it and you monitor it and you do all the things that you need to do, but you're not afraid of it. And a year is probably when you need to put it through all of your stakeholders to make them comfortable that when you tell it to go do 5 things, it only does those 5.
So it's not 6 months from the signed contract, but that's the testing, getting used to it period. That's the shows that it can work.
That's right. Yeah, you should, almost any agency that uses it from the day they go into production should start seeing a return on investment in probably 5 to 9 months.
Okay.
Right, and so that's nice compared to other software that takes years to get installed, and then when it's done, you're already $1 million ahead of your plan and a year behind. But the ability to say we've got it procured, we've got it installed, let's do a software. The development time is very minimal compared to anything else we've done before.
Harrison.
Yeah, I think another area that you really look at in terms of why there's such an interest in this is frankly the data visibility and the transparency of the audit trail, right? If you get into a situation where everybody wants to have more data, everybody wants to understand better where things are. If it's a set of individuals doing that across disparate offices, you've got to frankly stop them from doing their work, say where's your spreadsheet, where's your post-it note, where's your trail of the transactions that you issued. As opposed to when it's a bot, you can say, hi, this is going to be part of the process. You've got to be able to spit this out every transaction, every day, every 6 days, every whatever it is. And so you've got that tangible feedback into what's going on, what were the results, how am I doing? And ironically, that cycle frees you up to make more informed decisions about what you're doing. I mean, frankly, one of the activities that's listed within the IRS strategic plan is robotic process automation for a lot of the reasons that we're talking about here.
Adam, I want to bring you into the conversation because one of the things that you went through earlier on, 7 areas you initially identified as potential for bots. And we were talking about how great they are, right? You can turn them on, put them going, but it doesn't mean they're perfect for everything. Talk about your experience in terms of, hey, across these 7, maybe 5 were good or 4 were good. What did you guys find out?
Well, we actually started with a larger list. I think we might have started with 14. And because of some time constraints, particularly around the security side of getting this loaded on our equipment, we shrunk that down to about 7. But looking at it, what we wanted to make was a couple judgments, one of which is, can we get the bot to work? And is this the right process for the bot to perform on the organization's behalf? For example, there were instances where I read that we wanted to use a bot for reconciliation, and we could make it work. The question became, do I need to do this reconciliation, or is this just something that we have historically done because I had one problem 10 years ago, and should I continue to do it? And that's really one of the trade-offs that we have to make. The other question is, we have lots of, to what Harrison was saying earlier, lots of software that we spent hundreds of millions of dollars implementing. And the other question is, am I automating something that the software, so am I creating a bot for something that the software should be doing for me already? And those are a lot of things that the agencies have to make sure that they're looking at, which is, am I making the most of the existing technology infrastructure I have, or am I just adding an additional layer that may be unnecessary?
It's interesting because what I hear a lot of times about cybersecurity is, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, I need a firewall tool. Oh, now I need an antivirus tool. And then I need something else. And oh, well, didn't you know your firewall tool also does antivirus? Oh, no, I didn't know that. So there's almost an education piece. And maybe that's a question for Jim or Justin. How much education has to go into what you currently have versus also adding more? I mean, Justin, jump in.
Well, I was actually just yesterday discussing this with Ed Burrows, who's in GSA CFO office and is my patron saint of automation. And he was saying, because again, the technology allows greater look at process improvement itself. And one of the things that he's noticed is they're going in and looking and analyzing their processes to see what might be ripe for automation. They've discovered sometimes processes that it's not that it should be automated, it should be deleted entirely. And that's one of just the, again, exciting ancillary benefits of this, where it's just not about the tech. It's about that larger, being able to kick the tires again of our programs, look at priorities, and see what's good for automation, what's obviated entirely and is not needed anymore, versus also, and just like you said, what can be repurposed using existing technologies. So RPA is not just delivering a new tool into the toolbox, it's empowering all of our processes and all the other tools.
Adam, jump in.
Yeah, so we talk about moving things from low value to high value, and I think what Justin's touching on here is one of the high value things that we need to do is be more analytic about what we're doing. So today we give someone a task and they just automatically perform it because we've told them to. Yeah. One of the first steps in RPA is having that person take a step back and ask themselves, why have I been doing this? And while it might be a small analytic step, it is an analytic step that we may have been ignoring over time.
Data-driven decision making.
Absolutely. And Jim, jump in.
Yeah, so Jason, you had mentioned the word security, and that seems to be the real barrier right now for a lot of agencies. It's just they just can't wrap their arms around. If we were talking about HAL on Space Odyssey 2000, that's one thing. We're talking about a software code that promises to do what it's told to do, and we're doing it in processes that we do today. So it's not as if we're creating something new. We're taking Mary or Mike's work where they remote into a distant server, pull down a file, open that spreadsheet up, do a reconciliation, put it all back. So any PII data, any files and security, any access and all that for the bot is done exactly the way they would do it, except you have less eyes looking at that data. You have a great deal of certainty that it's only going to be done one way. You don't have Mary and Mike thinking that their way is a better way. And so you actually bring a better security posture to your organization by the fact that less people see the data and that you know that it's being repeated the way that you wanted it to be done and not a way that you think it should be done.
Yeah, I think that consistency is also a huge thing. Like one of the areas you joked about procurement being somewhat risk averse occasionally, not always, but occasionally. But you've got a situation where consistency is often the exact area goal that we have. And so when you start taking away some of the opportunities for unnecessary or unintentional variances, it's because that doesn't necessarily add value. I mean, it could add a little bit of value, but it's really not worth the risk return. I think it's really important from a procurement standpoint, from a CFO standpoint, where, hey, we don't want to have any errors. We don't want to have any fat fingers. We don't want to have any, Mary had a bad day, Bob didn't know how to do this, Harrison's an idiot and can't figure this out. Right, you've got a situation where if you tell the bot to do 1, 2, 3, it will do 1, 2, 3. And it's boring, and it's rigid, and it's inflexible. And it's a lot of things that you don't normally want a person to be, but it does exactly what it's supposed to do when you tell it to do it.
And the bot doesn't go to the bathroom, and it doesn't take lunch breaks, and it can work,
There's a lot of different ways to go with that, right? But yes,
the excitement of that is people that are out there trying to serve citizens today have to do 100% of that work today. With a bot, whenever it doesn't understand what to do, it passes the one or two back to people to reconcile, to resolve that issue. And so they are fresh. They haven't done 98 of them and said, I'm kind of tired, I'm ready to go home, and the last two get less than quality service. You get 98 that were very rigid, that were very exactly done the way you wanted them to, and those two outliers, someone's going to pick up with a fresh set of eyes and say, I'm happy to be doing these too.
Bring up security, Jim, and maybe let me turn to Justin on this. Is that a discussion you're having quite often with agency customers who are coming to you and saying, hey, we want to do RPA, but we're worried about PII, or do we have to get a credential? And I've heard there's some rumor that OMB may be having a policy about RPA eventually, but without asking you to comment on that directly, what are you hearing from agencies?
I can't speculate on anything.
I didn't ask you to. I just said, well, I'm just saying, if there was a policy.
Yeah.
You know.
If an agency wasn't coming to the table and bringing up things like security and PII and proper due process and management, that would be the problem. That's not just RPA, this is sound IT management itself. And that's part of why RPA development is such an interdisciplinary sport within agencies, because obviously the mission, it's coming from the program managers, but you have to be friends with the CIO shop, you have to be friends with IT, you have to have these people at the table, and not just as an after effect, it has to be baked in from the start. Not just because it's the sound way to manage IT, but also especially because it's new, and especially because there's questions, we want to make sure that we're showing that foot forward and can be able to answer the tough questions.
All right, we're going to take a quick break and hold that thought, Jim. We're going to come back and continue. You're listening to the panel discussion, Government and Robotics, the shift from low value to high value work, sponsored by UiPath on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network.
Do you know why robots are here? So we are free to do the things we love. So we don't spend hours and days and weeks doing one tedious thing after another.
The truth is, this is the ultimate collaboration. Robots do all the boring, backroom stuff, so we don't have to. We can dream big and push ourselves to be our best versions, so that everyone progresses, everyone wins.